One night, I was working the night shift. It was my first time, so I came in late by accident. I did get scolded. But they needed help very seriously due to the fact that one of our patients had blood all over their face. We did not know exactly why. We thought maybe someone had been in their room and wasn't watching them. But it wasn't until later the janitor said that he saw her scratching her own face. So during that time, I started helping to get all the cleaning supplies and medical gear that we would need to treat her wounds. But then she grew silent. She did not say anything for the next hour, when all of a sudden, she kept saying Madsen Madsen repeatedly while scratching her face again. I was terrified because that's my last name. I wasn't wearing my tag because I came in late, so I didn't have my proper uniform. I didn't know what to do, but she just kept saying Madsen Madsen. I couldn't tell. She was even looking at me because her blood was all over her face and her hair was sticking to it. So I just couldn't tell. Looking at me or not. I called the doctor to come and help me. He helped her, and I stood in the hallway during that time because I was terrified. Later, I thought to myself, maybe she was just saying mad son, as in her own child. But then again, I am well known, so maybe she somehow heard my name. But either way, I couldn't recognize her. I tried to ask what happened to her the next day, but they said patient confidentiality. They would only say she had been moved elsewhere. I never figured out what she was saying. My neighbor was talking about something else entirely. I've been a nurse now for 7 years, and I absolutely love it. Back when I was in school, besides your clinicals where you did a rotation in every unit, examples like labor, delivery, psych, etc. You had a month-long unpaid internship if you pass your exams, and more stated for graduation. The internships were given out by the head instructor that went alphabetically. My last name ends in AT. So I was at the tail end. All the internships I wanted, emergency medical surgery, etc. They had all been taken. The instructor told me, hey, we have a psych internship at a major psychiatric facility. You're a big strapping guy and I'm sure you'll fit perfect in great psych. I wasn't thrilled. I had no interest in psych, but I needed the hours to graduate and I figured I'd have stories to tell my buddies over a beer. I had no idea the hospital I interned at is quite well known. So I'm not going to go into any specifics. But it was a psych ward that deals with many different psychiatric disorders. There are a few floors. They had a rehab as well as a clinic for eating disorders. The floor I was assigned to the children's psychiatric ward. So the children 18 and below with all kinds of issues were there. Since I was not licensed yet, I didn't distribute medication or really do anything besides work as a glorified orderly. Some of the kids were awesome. They had severe autism or other issues, but they were still great kids. Then there was Adam. He was diagnosed with RAD, as well as a bevy of psychological issues. He was 10 and had tried to kill his 6-year-old sister, punched his mom so hard he knocked her unconscious, and killed the family's cat, among other things. He was not allowed general access, not allowed to do craft hour. He was not allowed to have access to scissors and such. He was allowed an hour of free time where I and another staff member brought him to a small atrium where he'd run in circles or kick a half-deflated soccer ball. Well, one day it was raining and the atrium is a no-go. So I was told I could let him in the small nurse's lounge. The charge nurse swore she removed any weapons he could have used. So I brought him in there. And while he sat in the corner and talked to himself, I sat in the chair and waited. I get radioed from an orderly. So I take my eyes off Adam for a millisecond. And the next thing I know, chairs violently launched at me. It hits me square in the face and I go down. I was stunned, not knocked out, and suddenly there's a 10-year-old 80-pound kid on the top of me, hell-bent on killing me. Luckily he was easily distracted. And at that exact moment, the charge nurse came into the lounge, probably to get coffee. I was able to flip him over and get him subdued. The charge nurse almost wets herself when she starts apologizing. I ended up with a broken nose and bruises. The head nurse was slapped on the wrist and I was given special treatment for the next 2 weeks. Surprisingly, besides Adam and a few others, that place made such an impact on me after I graduated, I became certified. I ended up working there for 4 years. So I have many stories from there. Last I heard Adam was in a long-term facility and with meds, and he is hopefully doing okay. So this happened about a year ago. Some background: I'm a student veterinary nurse, a 21-year-old female. In my placement, I'm required to do on-call. So I stay above the vets in a small flats. My first night on call, and I happen to be the only person staying in that flats, and we have 4 inpatients, cats and dogs. When someone rings the vets at night, it transfers to our out-of-hour service, which will then transfer any emergencies to our on that call. So it's about midnight and I'm just falling asleep when I hear a loud male shouting outside the window. It sounded like I'm going to break in, or something like that. The practice is not a rough area, but it is a little busy. So I immediately set up knowing something was wrong. I start to hear banging on the front glass doors and I panic. Sometimes when there are emergencies, people won't ring and just drive down and hope someone will be there. I consider going down, but it sounds as if they're trying to break the windows on the doors. Then I hear nothing for a couple of minutes and then a smash in the window below my room. The window happens to be the pharmacy. We keep drugs in there, but not dangerous drugs, as they're locked away. At this point, I'm pretty terrified. I call the owner of the vets and the police. The owner says she is on her way and has the 08 service called, heard say someone rang and was threatening to break in. So I have no idea if this guy's in the practice or what. I instantly run downstairs in my PJs to the kennels on the other side of the building. I can hear the dogs barking. And I know most of them are getting worked up with the noise. After I'm sure they are okay, I scout the rest of the practice out apart from the pharmacy room and run back upstairs. I can see out my window onto the street below and just can make out that guy's figure. He is carrying a torch and has his hood up. He runs off and I'm not sure if he has seen me at the window or anything else. But soon after the police and the owners arrive. I feel a little bit better. They look around and the window broken is a small window. The whole smash isn't big enough for anyone to fit through. So the police and owners decide it's fine to leave and go back home. I'm pretty bloody shaken up at this point and I'm reassured you probably would just some drunk and will come back. I don't sleep in about 4 in the morning. I hear someone walking on the glass below my window and the sound of someone cracking the glass off the window. I get up and check out the window and he's back. Now McCoy because I'm so tired after working in the day and can't even sleep thanks to this guy. I stand at the window with my light on making it obvious that I'm there and he carries on. So I ring the owner and police again. This time they come and catch when he pretends he's just out for a walk at night. I shout out the window that he rang the 08 service and they ring the number he used to ring and to no surprise it belongs to his phone. I had to do a police statement in my PJs in the staff room by the time we were finished and it was 6 in the morning. I could have gone to sleep, but I just drove home because there was no way I was staying on my own again. 2 days later, I was put back on call and was in the flat on my own again with the window boarded up. Apparently, the guy been going around the town and following girls home and breaking into cars, so they weren't surprised. He wanted to save the animals and stop the noise. The only noise was our drip monitors, and it's not audible from the outside. The dogs only started barking when he tried to break in. Obviously this trip was after some ketamine, and luckily, the police took him in and they replaced our window. About 10 years ago, my grandfather was suffering from liver cancer and fading quickly. He was a wonderful man with a deep belly laugh and a contagious spirit. Even in his last days with no appetite, he hid up every bite of home-cooked meal I had brought him just to make me smile. Constantly by his side was a stern but warm hospice nurse whom I'll call a Jen. She had moved here from Haiti and had been with my grandfather for about 2 weeks. She shared a few Haitian superstitions about death with us as a source of comfort. When someone dies, something drops. Your loved ones may be reluctant to let go when you are watching them. Everyone has a death time. In a gentle way. She informed us one day in October that his time to pass had come and that it would be around 8 p.m. It was a hard pill to swallow, not to mention one that we didn't necessarily believe. We went about our day spending some time with him on the couch. And eventually, my mother and uncle ordered us dinner for delivery. At 8:02 p.m., the doorbell rang. My uncle went to grab money for the delivery driver. My mother and I went to the kitchen to get plates and silverware. At that moment, my grandfather was finally left alone. He took his last breath simultaneously. Despite being on opposite ends of the kitchen, the refrigerator door flung open and nearly every piece of food dropped into the floor. We were devastated by the loss, but found some solace knowing that this was time HN packed her things and left, like the Mary Poppins of death, forever shrouding my family with an eerie feeling of mystery and comforts. I'm currently a supervisor at a skilled nursing facility. We regularly have call lights going off and not just an electrical problem. In rooms that are empty or have recently had someone pass. Most of the time they are bathroom emergency call lights that are triggered, which when poured activate a pull-down switch on the wall that has to be manually forced back up. The worst one was an emergency call light that was going off in a bathroom on the 3rd floor, in a bathroom that is always locked in use primarily for storage. I'm the super and I have all the keys and the only key to that bathroom on my shift, which is of course night shift. I took an aide with me to go unlock the room and climb over the store wheelchairs and mattresses and such to deactivate the light. Super creepy. One night one of our phones kept ringing and I was sitting in my office near the nurse's station. I kept hearing the phone ring, get picked up by nurse and then quickly hung up. I thought we were being prank called. So I picked it up the next time it rang and heard static. My phone read made on the line screen, meaning that it was a call coming from maintenance, which again is locked and I have the only key. I was so convinced we'd experienced something when we went into the maintenance department that I video recorded our entry. We didn't see anything creepy, but we felt it. I unplugged their phone, left them a work order to fix it. Another time recently, we had a rehab patient call us into the room. She was in a tizzy over the kids in her room and wanted to know what kind of place this was. She had dementia, so we didn't think anything of it. Then the person in the room across the hall called for us in a wide because there were some kids harassing your lady across the hall. She told us you heard them yell and run away. We all thought it was creepy, and then 2 other people further up the hall call it about the same thing. This made me a little freaked out. I went so far as to go around the building and the outside of the building to see if I could find any tracks or any signs of kids. Maybe we were being pranked and something like that. But with snow on the ground, it would be easy to see fresh tracks, and there was never any. They all agreed that no one was coming from outside. The kids were entering the rooms in the hallway and then leaving back into the hallway. This was all about at 4 a.m. and the only entry to that hall would be from my office and the nurse's station. Do the other doors are fire exits wire with alarms? This may not be the creepiest stuff, but a dimly lit place like this makes your imagination run wild in the middle of the night. Myself, my in-laws and husband all work at the hospital. Personally, the only experiences I've had are really just off-putting emotions. As a nurse, many of us understand not only the smell of death, but the feeling of it. I've had a few experiences as I've only been in the field a couple years of walking into a patient's room and feeling death coming. I knew the night my closest patient was going to die by the feeling in the room. I still think about him daily. However, one experience that shocked me happened on a day I wasn't on shift. But of course, we all heard about it. And it's just a patient died and the family came to tell us. We give them space and privacy during those times and are often not in the room. They informed us that after the priest said his prayer, their father passed peacefully. The only problem was, there was no priest, we did not call one. And our only volunteer priest was not in that day. No one saw him come or go. And we have checked the security footage. Even my mother-in-law has worked on the unit I am on for over 20 years and has had similar experiences. Let me tell you, although not very paranormal, sundowning and full moons have very real effects. We actually circle full moon days on our calendar to alert staff that it's going to be a crazy shift. It's my husband, however, who works in the basement, who has the most stories actually, from lights and radios going on and off to footsteps when no one's around, all the typical but still very unsettling paranormal experiences. Since my husband started as a porter, he's now a supply coordinator. He knows every hall of our hospital, whereas I do not. I rarely leave my units. One day we were taking a shortcut out of the hospital together, down a hall I'd never been in before. When I mentioned how cold and off I felt, I told him the hall was making me feel sad. He then told me this is the only hall to and from the morgue. As we were discussing this, we walked right past it. I am a strong believer in energies, which is why I think that's why I felt so unsettled, and a hall that seems so much death. Anyway, not the scariest stuff, but there's definitely a lot that goes bump in the night, if you know what I mean, at a hospital. I have been a nurse for almost 6 years, and including the 3 years of training. I have 9 years of different creepy stories throughout this time. Let's face it, if there was going to be some kind of ghostly encounter, a hospital's a pretty likely place for it to occur with all the deaths that inevitably take place. This particular incident takes place in a hospital in the southeast of England, where I completed my nurse training. I was in my 3rd and final year at this point. The hospital had decided that the ward I was on was due to be refurbished, so our ward patients and staff included moved to an overflow ward so that the builders could get their jobs done without any restrictions. As any student nurse will tell you, we get asked to do all sorts of things to help out, and some of them have nothing to do with what we are studying. However, it is all experience. I was rostered to be on placement the day of the move, which was logistical nightmare as we all had to move all current inpatients, equipment, and staff in a safe way. I was asked to help with the move, which was fine by me. We managed to get the patients and the bulk of essential equipment moved within a few hours. As the last patient was being wheeled off the ward, Sister asked me to turn the patient call bell system from the mains, and we left. Once we had put away the bulk of the stuff and we have moved down and gotten all the patients settled, I was asked to go back up to the empty ward to fill up a few metal cages on wheels with some of the non-essentials that had been left behind. It was boring things like spare extension cords, paper, and stationery supplies. Each ward is cross-charged for these items and has a set budgets and any information on the display boards. As I walked into the empty ward, I had this sense of anxiety fill me. I was creeped out. There wasn't a single person on this ward except me. The ward sister was coming up to meet me in the hour to help move the cages, and boy, did I feel totally alone up there. After about half an hour, I had pretty much finished and was just putting the last few bits and pieces into the cages that were by the nurse's station, when a patient call bell went off. I almost crapped myself. I'm sure you guys know how they work, but just in case, each patient bed space, side room, toilet, shower, etc. has a call bell or a buzzer once activated, unless the staff know the patient wants us for something. And there is also an emergency budget that gets pulled usually by staff when there is, yep, you guessed it, it was an emergency. This was just a normal patient call bell that was going off. But as I had been the only person there and I was the person who turned off the system, I was freaking out. Instinct took over and I had to go see if I actually was needed or not. So shockingly, there wasn't anyone there. I reset the buzzer and waited outside the ward for the sister to come up and meet me. Thankfully, I didn't wait long at all. I told her what had happened and having a good working relationship. She took me seriously and told me if I didn't want to go back into the ward, I didn't have to. But of course I did. I didn't want to let them down. We had to walk to the end of the ward to get to mobile computers. As we walked, I could have sworn I heard footsteps behind us. But I didn't want to sound crazy and mentioned it. The sister then turned to look at me and mouthed, "Can you hear that?" And when I nodded, we sped up and got to the computers and got out of there pretty quick. When we went to move the metal cages, we heard what sounded like a wooden walking stick being hit against an old-fashioned radiator and one of the side rooms. I lost all my nerve at this point. And the sister was brave enough to go and have a look. But the room was empty and the noise stopped when she walked in. We spoke about it afterward and neither of us felt threatened in any way. Or like we were in any danger. It seems more like they were having fun knowing that their noises were no longer being drowned out by a bustling war or being mistaken for a patient. Just over a year ago, my father had a heart attack. The cardiac part of the hospital goes in one way and out another, so it's pretty hard to find the right door when you're new to visiting that ward. The first time he was admitted, my mother and I found it easy to get there. There is normally a lot of staff around to help. However, the second or third time he had gone on to the ward, they got taken straight in there because of chest pains and they had to go to the emergency department. It was at least a busy time in the hospital as we were dropping off his medication rather than visiting. Before I really started, I just want to give a clear picture of the hospital. It has 3 entrances to the front and 1 in the back with various car parks based around these doors. The hospital is made up of an old and new building which are connected by a bridge. The cardiac ward is in the old part of the hospital. However, this door has limited parking. We go into the back door rather than the one which goes straight up to the cardiac ward as the parking around there is full, taking us into a new building. This means that not only do we need to make our way to the top of the hospital, but also to the other side. So we aren't sure where we're going and ask a nurse who gives us a model version of the directions to the cardiac ward. We follow them for a while and end up completely lost. So we asked another nurse who gives us more directions and we're lost again. We're both the stereotypical idiot females when it comes to following directions. So we try following signs, but we aren't sure where we are and neither of us are familiar with this part of the hospital. Eventually, we end up in an elevator that looks like a service one as it was sliding the mesh doors rather than solid metal ones. The buttons claim they can get us back to where we were from. So we try it. This puts us at the other end of the corridor that we have been on before. So we take another elevator to put us down on the right floor, which ended up not being the right floor after all. We now have the option of going to floor 0, which my mom informs me is the more as you need a key to get done. There are floor 3 unless you want to go higher. We press to take floor 3 and end up in this empty white hallway with a disused end-of-life cancer ward. I'm instantly creeped out. We are in a white hallway with an old ward beds and equipment or abandoned an old flight of stairs going up to somewhere you can't see. It is not signposted. A set of double doors at the end of the hall and an older couple in their 50s wearing reasonably modern clothes. There was a man looking into the world with his hand and the woman's shoulder. She just stood there facing the wall. My mother looks around and suggests we find someone to ask where we go from here and does not notice this creepy couple standing right in front of us until I point them out. They do not acknowledge us in the same way she acknowledged them. She then goes and walks down the corridor as I'm contemplating what the hell I should do. Because I don't want to stay on my own, but I don't want to go through the doors. Then this nurse in a uniform that clearly is not the same as the other ones, opens a door just wide enough to get through. She walks into the corridor, looks right at us, and says you should not be down here with us. I tell my mom to get back in the elevator, but she tries to ask the nurse where we need to go. The nurse replies the highest button. So we get in and press the one she said. Whilst this is taking us to God's who knows where, I have a bad feeling about what just happened. So I tried to make sense of it by asking if the nurse's uniform means she works in a specific area, or was a higher ranking or something. My mom used to work at the hospital cleaning, so she has seen most of the uniforms worn. She applies no, and that nurse maybe came from another hospital for a training program or to help out. The elevator opens, and we get out and walk down another empty corridor. This time we bump into a nurse wearing the usual uniform walking back towards a different elevator. She stops us from going any further and tells us we're on the floor with operating rooms, and we can't stay up here. We tell her that we are lost and get into the elevator with her, which puts us in a completely different part of the hospital where we need to be. Problem solved. Apart from that, I'm convinced we had an encounter with something paranormal. A few months ago, my dad was in the hospital again. And during visiting hours, one of his nurses came to talk to us. We had just been talking about what my parents described as a weird experience, and my dad asked a nurse if she knows what a week could have been. She thinks that we are playing a joke on her, and tells us that this is all the floors that there are, and the floor that we are talking about she has never heard of. She realizes that we are serious though. And she says that maybe we bumped into the hospital ghost, an old nurse who has apparently been seen on the children's ward when a child is dying. After she leaves, the child makes a full recovery. I have heard this story before, but a kind spirit who helps others, and I can 100% say that whatever we saw was not did not want us around. Of course, I can't be sure that it was really paranormal and not just a lover of the paranormal being biased, but it didn't feel right. They were an old-fashioned close, they were see-through. And they were very violent towards us. But I had this feeling of complete dread when we stepped out of the elevator. That coupled with the fact that my mom didn't even see the couple. At least not till I pointed them out. The fact that the nurse said the area does not exist, and the fact that neither of us can remember the facial features of anyone we saw on that floor. Just the clothing and the hair color told me that what we saw was not normal or good. I now have an absolute fear of going anywhere on my own in the hospital, just in case I see anything else that I'd rather not. I still get the creeps when thinking about it. I spent my New Year's Eve and Christmas in hospital. So yeah, go me. I'm 14 years old, and I was in a pretty bad accident. My dad was T-boned by a drunk driver, and a piece of metal almost completely impaled my leg. I really did escape death. This happens not even 3 hours ago, and I just can't get back to sleep. Thank God I'm leaving today. There has been this nurse, she looks like a really normal and nice person. The things she has said all over the past couple of days though, have just given me the creeps. My leg will sometimes start to leak blood, and she just needs to redress it. She would gently rub my leg randomly. She was not putting cream or any type of medical rub on it, she would just rub it, nowhere near the wound either. Like always on the other side. I would ask her what she was doing, and she would answer, changed from testing the pain to massage, to feeling for lumps, all while doing the same exact thing every time. She did it uncomfortably slow too, and always, for a long time. She would make these comments about how I had little to no chest hair, and how it would come in once I'm a man. She would make these comments, like ladies love men with scars. I woke up 3 hours ago, and this nurse was just standing at the foot of my bed staring at me. I didn't move. I do not think she knew I was awake. I had my eyes half open, peeping out, looking at her. She was literally just standing there looking at me. I turned over to suggest I was awake, and no joke. I saw her leave the room and walk into the hallway. What do you suggest I do? Do I tell the doctor or some of the other nurses, or do I just keep this to myself?